right. Whoops. All right. I think it is live right now. Let's just kind of sit tight for a minute and see before we. All right. There's a few people jumping on already. I had to go to a different screen and turn on Instagram Live, so because that one you can't do automatically. So, all right, guys, we're live. This is the TMD live show. It's Wednesday night. It's 7:30. We're on the mean streets of Marshfield, Wisconsin, and we're back again. I haven't done a live stream in a while, specifically about maple, and getting a little bit more in depth, a little bit more technical. But tonight, for you maple enthusiasts, that's what we're doing tonight. We've got a couple special guests here tonight. First off, we've got David from Michigan. You've seen him here before. He's been on this live stream before. David, introduce the people to you. Tell them about what you do there in Michigan, and we're going to get right into this.
I'll make it short and sweet. I'm a first-generation maple producer. Have about 1,500 taps of my own, custom boil for just over 2,000 on a 3x12 liter fuel oil. Got the Max Flue raised back pan and the Revolution front pan.
Cool. And you're in southern Michigan. You're
Springport, Michigan. Yep, south of Lansing. 30 minutes south of Lansing.
Yep. And then the next guy we got on tonight, this is a special guest. We have Kevin Lawyer, right?
That's it.
That's how you say it. He's from Vermont, and he's into the maple industry in a lot of different ways. Why don't you introduce yourself, Kevin, and tell us about that?
Sure, I can tell you about that. So I'm representing the East, I guess. I grew up in northwestern Vermont, kind of in some people would call it the promised land of maple, I suppose, in Bakersfield. So there's maple everywhere around me. But I can say that my life started maybe not unlike a lot of people, and my grandfather made syrup. So as a kid, I always enjoyed watching that. My father has kind of always been a workaholic, so he was I would say he was the guy that got all the daily chores done. But as I got a little older, he always cut a lot of wood, but decided to get into snowmobiles. So snowmobiles for him were a big deal back in the late 80s and early 90s. So kind of throughout that life, that became a part of what I did. So we faded from maple a little bit because snowmobiles were so big.
Oh, wow.
So later on, snowmobiles, I know being from Wisconsin, maybe even Michigan, I think that snowmobiles are still a big deal. We all have had less snow than we used to have, but moving forward kind of into the late 90s, snowmobiles started to slip because weather slipped as well. So I would say our maple path, even though I was around maple as much as I could, the maple path really started late 90s, early 2000s when my father decided to jump back in. We always had the woods, but we kind of took it more seriously then. So that's when I started to take it very seriously. So we jumped back into a bush that has been around for 100 years. In fact, the paths of horses and buckets are still there. We use them now as walking paths, but about 3,000 taps and on, a mountainside in Vermont that's, quite steep. So we still trek those hills, but moving forward into early 2000s, it was different then. If you guys had been around at all, you saw that syrup prices were down. They weren't great. Vacuum was kind of coming in, but no one was doing a lot like they are now. RO machines were coming in, but you had on 3,000 taps, you might have made 10 barrels at the most, if you were lucky, in a place that you had high sugar. So I think that for us, it was okay until 2007. 2007 was the year that, if anybody has kind of looked at the history of maple, 2007 was the year that they had the syrup shortage. So the syrup prices went kind of through the roof.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah, and that's when syrup producers, everybody got into it. In fact, it was kind of the perfect storm. Vacuum was coming in, RO machines were coming in, syrup prices were way up, over $3 a pound. Which was significantly higher than they were getting paid at the time. And then everybody kind of got into syrup, and we call it the syrup bubble for a while. So I was also in at that point and really wanted to get into maple full time, but was continuing on weekends and working full time. And then I ended up buying an orchard, an apple orchard, which is kind of off the beaten path. But I bought an apple orchard in 2012 and then bought a maple woods in 2014.
Yeah.
So added to 3,000, another 7,000, and we ended up about 12,000, which is what we do now. But
Okay.
not to make it long-winded, but I guess my life overall, I ended up buying another apple orchard in 2016, which I still have. And then 2014, I said, you know what? I need to get into maple full time. Like I just got to do this. I got to jump in. I love the industry. I'm kind of an addict. I want to be at a place where I can help others, you know? So I don't know if this is the right move looking back, but I kind of walked into Leader and said, hey, you should hire me. I have skills. I can do this. And they did. So I started on the road, actually, Tim, out where you were. I started working on the road as a salesman and started out in northwestern Wisconsin. And then I moved into Michigan and then kind of Ohio and moved into throughout the years. I moved all over the country. And honestly, I think it's the greatest experience of my life. I love getting people going. And now I don't do it as much now. I'm kind of sitting behind a desk. But yeah, that's my path as far as maple goes. But I'm an addict.
Yeah, it sounds like you maybe had, a similar in getting into it like I did. I grew up on a small farm, dairy farm out here, and had it around as a kind of just as a hobby type thing. What my dad and my grandpa did. They just did it for their own use. It was very, very common in this area, and that's kind of how we started, very primitively. It wasn't until probably around that time, 2007-ish, 6, I think, is when I started putting some money into it and actually having a little building to work out of. Like before that, we were out in the open, in the woods, just cooking on a big old pan. And, from there, I grew it slowly and slowly and slowly to where now it's up like 3 years roughly right now where I transitioned into doing this full time. So,
and how many cows do you have, Tim?
We do so all told, what I boil for is about 15,000, and about half of that is mine and half of that is other people's.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's some work.
It's enough for me and the kind of the limited, the shoestring crew that I have helping when we go. It's a lot to handle. There's a lot to do. Even at that level, it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
for sure. Plus, we're spread out too. That's not all in one spot. My stuff's spread out between 5 different woods that we tap. So I'm kind of in a traditionally big dairy farming area, and we don't have these big, vast woods, forests. They're more like wood lots on farms, and things like that. So it's
now. Are you flat, Tim, or are you pretty steep?
It's fairly flat. I mean, there is some little rolling hills and stuff like that, but it's not real. It's not like out by you at all. Not even close. I've been out to Vermont one time and saw, how it is out there, and it's totally different. Totally different.
It's very steep. My elevation drop is 1,200 feet.
Right.
It's significant. So it does come in one direction, luckily, but you have to climb for it. I feel like it's different elements where snowpack slows you down because you need to climb on rock and ledge and paths that they're just not easy walking. If the snowpack is too deep, you end up not being able to take equipment up there,
Exactly. And just for kind of fun, this platform I'm using right now is a little bit new to me. I had a picture, I think I had it before, but I just kind of wanted to show the people. And I should be able to here if you guys bear with me. This is today. Let's see here. There you can see it. That's me working out in the woods. Well, I don't think it's uploaded yet. Hold on. Is it there now? You guys see that?
There you are. I see you. Yeah. Okay.
That's how it looks. We have no snow.
No snow. Okay. No snowpack. All right.
Nothing this year. Yeah. Last year was a very, very mild winter temps wise, and snow was very limited. We actually have less snow this year than we did getting less snow this year than last year. However, this winter's been a lot colder. There's a lot of frost in the ground right now. But as you can see there, like we have nothing for snow. It's
What
really
percent
weird.
grade are you shooting for, Tim, on your mains?
Probably
fall?
like 2 to 3%.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to build it if you don't have it.
Yeah,
have
I
to.
mean this picture here, there's a little bit of there's some slope in that woods from one side to the other, but you know, it could actually be worse. But yeah, talking like you, Kevin, you were kind of mentioned a little bit earlier about the snowmobiles really being into that. I mean, that kind of got me a little excited. I'm not a snowmobiler, but I'm a huge into ATVs and old two strokes and stuff like that. So anything with motors, I love that kind of thing. But snowmobiling, yeah, it's rough snowmobiling in Wisconsin this year for sure.
Yes, it is. And honestly, the conversation about tariffs today, I'm sure it's interesting how similar the industry is to maple in some ways. You know, I grew up with an extreme seasonal business that, you know, you had these ebb and flows of marketability, and maple can be that way, and it's different, but it's very similar in some ways. So, you know,
Well, yeah, Arctic Cat and Yamaha aren't even producing snowmobiles anymore after 2020.
yeah, and again, it's interesting because, you know, the industry of snowmobiling is dealing with similar where they have two sides of the border to manage competition. You know, so I think
Yep. That is a good point.
Yep. So it's as recently as this year, David, they had sent a letter out. I think Polaris did as well, that they're going to cease production after this year.
I
know of Yamaha and Cat. I don't know. I didn't see the Polaris.
Okay.
But I wouldn't doubt it because the Polaris dealer here in town has 2023 models sitting on the floor still.
Yeah, and the company itself, you know, when you had a few snow years in the East, they kind of, I would say, bombed in the East in the early to mid 2000s. They just couldn't sell snowmobiles anymore, you know. But it's recreational, you know. So the unfortunate part about snowmobiling is that it's kind of what you do last, you know. You tighten that one up first, and then you do other things. But
let's be honest, since Skidoo come out with the Rev chassis, how much has really honestly changed? I mean, there's little creature comforts and some things, you know, and the suspension, but really, if you have like a 2008 Rev 800, do you really need to spend 20 grand and upgrade to a new one?
I'm sure if you're in the snowmobiling world, they would disagree, but
you're
to
probably right.
The average customer, I think that, I agree with you. It doesn't appear to have changed all that much, but snowmobiling is a tough industry, I'm sure.
Yeah. Had you ever been to the snowmobiling world championships in Eagle River, Wisconsin?
I have not, but man, that sounds fun.
That's every year. It was like a couple weekends ago, but but it's just been
it on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find it.
It's funny. You bring me back a little bit to my childhood. I have this Arctic Cat, and I'm trying to think of his name. My father used to go to an event every year, and I have Blair Morgan. You ever hear that name in snowmobiling?
Oh yeah.
I have signed, pictures of him in storage that my father got a chance to meet him. So that was pretty cool. I thought that was the coolest thing when I was like 14. But
that was really cool. Yeah, his prime was like 07, 08, right in there. He was
There was another one too. Kirk Hibbert, for all those snowmobiling fans. Kirk Hibbert and Blair Morgan were the two guys. They were. Yeah. I think they went from Yamaha to Cat or something. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's cool.
Yeah, I think Blair went from Cat to Skidoo.
Is that what it was? Okay,
yeah.
I knew they jumped a little bit, but yeah.
We got some comments here. We got Backwinds Mountain Maple. He's in the I know he's in that. If I say it right, I'm from Wisconsin. The Adirondacks.
Oh, there you go, Adirondacks. Yeah, he's
Adirondacks.
He must be New York then? Is that New York?
Yeah, he's in New York. Yeah. He says he's got 3 feet of snow there. So.
Yeah, he's dealing with some snow.
Yep. And here he says Tucker Hibbert.
Tucker Hibbert. Yeah, there you go. Is that a son? Maybe I can't remember honestly.
Oh.
I don't. Yeah, that name sounds familiar. That's the same group. They were all famous, I think.
Where is guys? Where is anybody out there watching from? If you want to leave a comment where you're at, we'll put it up on the screen. I'd like to know where people are coming from tonight, but and we can throw that up there. And if you have any questions that you specifically have for us, feel free to put those up there as well. But yeah, no, that was a great introduction, Kevin, and Very interesting. Now you work for Leader Evaporator as a sales rep.
No, I
position?
do. So actually, none of those are true, honestly. So I used to work for Leader.
Okay.
Leader is now part of H2O Innovation. So Leader had been around since 1888, and then had been recently bought out by them. So I was in sales for a number of years, and I've kind of since. I guess my title at this point is Director of Products and Marketing. So I've switched titles a little bit, kind of in house, but I feel a little bit like once you're in sales, you kind of never leave sales. To me, although it's the sales word, it was really about getting guys going and starting up and being a part of the industry. That's what I do, right? Like I still take those calls. I still love this conversation. Being with you guys is awesome. I'm crazy enough to do this every day and then go home and make syrup. I tap this weekend. I'm trying to get through the woods and get everything going for the year. In fact, one part of my woods has lines that are on the ground right now. So I broke my extractor a few weekends ago. So I'm like, I guess I need to get that fixed, because otherwise if it runs, it's going on the ground. So that's just what happens. But yeah, it's I guess I go to some trade shows now and speak where I can, but for the most part, I stay at home.
Okay. We got a couple comments here. We got, let's see here. What do we got? We usually get 2 to 3 feet of snow at this time of year. Pretty much nothing right now in Quebec.
Interesting.
Okay. And then we've got Jameson. He's from Michigan. How much? David, there's a question for you. How much sap do you think I will get off 40 trees per day?
Well, is it soft or hard? There's a difference there. And, that's
Right.
$1 million question there. I mean, are you talking early season, late season, middle of the season?
Right.
But usually it's a gallon per tap per day.
Yep.
That's a pretty good number.
We got Elijah from Albany, New York, Albany County.
He probably thinks it's Albany.
Yeah.
I think that's how they say it there, Albany. There you go. My wife is actually from the Midwest. She's from Minnesota. So every once in a while I hear that come out. Bagel. I don't know how do you say bagel, Tim? Bagel? Oh, you're not too bad. It's funny to listen to I say it's funny. They probably think that I'm funny. So it's but
we got let's see here. We got Garrett. What effect do you think this deep frost will have on a maple season with no snow? So he's probably speaking more to me over here. I mean, I've seen it where one year, specifically in my mind, within the last 6 to 7 years, we had something kind of similar to this, where really not much snow. The ground got really, really frozen. And then when the temps and conditions came, we thought, wow, it's going to be here. The sap should run. And it was so weird. It didn't do anything with perfect conditions for over a week. And we attributed it to the ground being really frozen. So,
if them roots are froze,
maybe,
yeah.
It generally can be a negative effect on sugar as well if you have no snow. I find that, the blast we get, I don't know if you see that same thing, Tim. We get cold blast in January with no snow, and then we get a warm spell, and it really, to me, I think we need the snowpack. I prefer a snowpack versus.
I would very much so, yeah.
Versus, I think it also reaches lower in the soil, as well, and it may affect filtering, when you have that hard frost on the top. But the one thing I'll say, I think with research centers is they try to gather that information to predict it. It can be challenging, but yeah, as sugar makers, I think we want snow. But I can say that guys notoriously say they make their most syrup when there's no snow. So who knows?
I always think that can potentially lead to maybe a quicker end of the season, though. If you kind of have that snow out there in the woods, it acts as a buffer to kind of preserve things. And, I don't know, that I would rather see it, but yeah.
Well, sometimes if you get the snow first, then the cold and the ground's unthawed, then you lose the snow. That definitely would. But I think if you have some frost and some snow, it's kind of the happy medium. I would say for flat land here where we're at, probably different for everybody. But I think I want a little bit of both.
David, when you warm up in Michigan, you dry out quick. It's dry. Yeah.
It's just it just goes. And then I'm soft maples. Yeah, I'm 98% soft maple, so they just bud. I mean that temperature gets warm and they just want to bud. So I got to be really on it.
That could be the advantage of having, you know, rocky maple close to the surface, is that they tend to hold moisture, you know, where I think the quality soil, deeper soils. There was a customer I went to years ago in Ohio that he was digging a foundation for his house. And I asked him, where did he get the soil? Did he bring the soil in? He's like, no, I just dug it out of the hole. And I'm like, yeah, it's not Vermont soil. Yeah, you dig for a foot and it's pretty much pure rock. So just different world, you know. But,
Yep.
We got this guy asked David, where are you in Michigan? But he must have joined a little later. You're in Springport, right?
Yep.
Springport. Yep. Because I think he's from Michigan. I don't know. Off grid with Jay and Jen. That's who's watching from there. Here's one for you, David.
Oh. How much do you need to put up with you, Dad? How about that?
You got a heckler, David.
Yeah. No surprise there.
I think my dad feels the same. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad can't do as much anymore, but he still gets out there and does what he can. But yeah, we got Warren Boxler past 2 seasons had record years with no snow during the maple season.
F snow.
He says F the snow. He doesn't want any of that.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Warren Boxler gets out and taps, how early he taps, because that's generally what I try to get ahead of sometimes, is that I know that by mid-January, late January, this time of year is like, man, I got to get ahead of it or else I'm going to have 3 feet of snow. It's going to take me twice as long, you know? So, and I think that's part of the reason why guys tap so early, is they just need to get ahead of their snowpack and their labor costs.
Wow. Not an issue here.
Yeah.
It's different.
I always kind of joke around like those guys out in Vermont. Like if some of my videos and one of them kind of pokes fun at the Vermont guys, and it's where they're tapping in summer basically because they're trying to get every little bit they can.
Don't you say if we just leave the tap in and change the spile 3 times a year?
Yeah. We're just going to leave it in.
Yeah, there's no question that tapping is getting to, I mean, I think you guys have had a conversation here recently, but tapping is getting earlier and earlier, you know, better materials, better practice. And I think, just for me, if I'm going to gamble on any part of the season, it's going to be the first part, not the last part. I'd rather be ready when the warm weather comes than trying to get ready when the warm weather comes, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's a bit of a gamble on trying to deal with your finances, but I still think that, especially where you are, David, like I mean, unless you could tap in a day, that's different. But if it takes you a week or 2 to tap, you know, I think that the chances of having a better season are higher if you're tapping early.
Yep. That's kind of my strategy this year. And man, I tell you, I'll be honest. I've sat there, looked at the next 2 weeks, and there's like 2 days together, 3 days together, but I'm looking at the lows and they're in the teens, and then it's like 38. And then I was sitting there, then I'm remembering we've had bare ground, we have a deeper frost, we have all this. So it's going to take the trees longer to wake up. Then we have like a 2-week stretch where it dips down into the teens and 20s. And then it looks like the fire hose is going to turn on. So against my better judgment, I'm going to hold off, and I'm going to wait till about the 23rd of February. And then I'm just going to have to go. I'm getting everything. So I just set tank today. I'm going to be where I can go out and drill holes. It'll take me about 2 days to tap.
Yep.
And then I'm just going to be ready. But it's tempting, you know, because there's a 47-degree day coming up, but the trees, I just don't think, I mean, they're going to run a little bit, but it's going to be minimal. And I want fresh tap holes with your guys' check valves that I got this year and everything from you. So it's what I'm going to do. You never know really for sure the right call, but I think this is the right call.
Well, I think vacuum matters. You know, if you can keep a system tight with vacuum, that's a key element as well.
Yep.
Here we got a comment from Jean Jacobs. She works for me. in the store, and she's giving a shout out to my dad, Ernie. So he's 84. No, he's 85. Yes, he's 85. So he still shows up once in a while when we're bottling and he helps.
Wow, good for him.
Oh,
Definitely shout out to how. So when did he start making syrup?
Well, it's like I said, when I grew up on a small dairy farm, and you know, they were doing it. My grandpa was doing it. You know, it's just forever. You know, it's always been something that's been on the family home farm forever.
So he's psyched though. That's great.
Yep. So, should we get into the tariff stuff?
Let's do it.
Kind of talk about that a little bit. Now, I'm definitely not an economist, not at all. So this is not at my area of expertise. So, but I mean, I can come up with some questions and stuff. And David, you researched it a little bit before we got on here. And Kevin, I think you're pretty well. I mean, we talked a little bit before we went live, and I think we can have a pretty good discussion about this. What is you know, they're talking about tariffs. Trump's going to be doing tariffs, and it's not something I'm necessarily against. I'm just because it might affect maple. We don't need to get into all the political talk, but I mean,
it's a 25% imposed tariff across the board on all imports from Canada as of February 1st. Is what is
okay for all everything
across
from
the board.
Canada. All right, so that would include what else is Canada?
So we get 80% of our soft lumber from Canada. We get 60% of our crude oil from Canada, and 25% of our steel from Canada.
How about maple syrup? Do that one.
Okay. And Canada also has the highest grade of nickel. There's no nickel in the U.S., so we get 100% of our nickel from Canada. And then as far as maple syrup goes, they sent $368 million to the U.S. of syrup last year. Canada did. So that's a chunk of change.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember as maple producers is that we're intertwined together in syrup. You know, certainly with syrup, because the syrup business is much bigger than the equipment business. You know, the syrup moves all around the world, but I would say the majority of it, as you alluded to, is sold in the U.S. So the consumption of syrup is significantly the U.S. Now, when it comes to equipment, it's a little bit different. You know, obviously historically, you know, equipment actually started. Although there was, I think, areas around the North America that were starting, I think that Ohio can take credit for the sorghum pan back in the mid 1800s from Mr. Cook that was making sorghum pans. So sorghum was kind of before syrup. And then Mr. Gustav Grimm, who grew up an hour from him in Mansfield, started, I think, there's no history, but as far as I can tell, saw that sorghum pan and said, hey, I think I can make that work for maple. So started making a maple syrup evaporator, and then kind of sort of quickly realized that the industry wasn't in Ohio. I think Ohio was industrializing differently. Decided, you know what, the East has a whole lot more maple trees. I think we need to go east. So moved to Vermont, and then there's a lot of history within that. But, you know, I think that we're going to always be intertwined some with Canada because, you know, there is some history about syrup or maple production being kind of the anti-slave sugar. But I think that, you know, there was enough free land in Vermont and Quebec that was potentially perfect for syrup production, but not easily accessible. So I think that's what slowed it for a while until technology took over. But, you know, as far as where Leader sits and where H2O sits, you know, Leader's history actually starts in Vermont, right in my hometown. Where I sit, about 5 minutes into town here is where they started. So they actually bought their first patent from two guys in Canada. So the first Flupan patent was two guys in Canada, and historically those two guys were actually Quakers. They're in the Quaker cemetery. They were Quakers. They were simple men. They didn't do much. So the start of Leader Evaporator came from Quakers. It's a fun little history. But moving up until today, there's a lot of history that goes along with that. Moving up into today, as far as production now, it's primarily in the U.S., almost exclusively in the U.S. throughout its history, because I think that was what the business model was, is, U.S. made products made by Americans. That was the business model forever. I think that to say that it's us versus them may be wrong, even though sometimes I feel that, like, it's Canada versus the U.S. But now being a part of H2O, I can say that H2O is very sensitive to the brand, but in terms of tariffs, I think that the objective is to value the brand in its origins. So I know that the struggle some is like, okay, what do you do with tariffs, right? Well, positioned in manufacturing in Vermont, positioned in manufacturing in Minnesota for the water company, and then in Hamnord, which is about 2.5 hours north, for maple and water. So you have water in the U.S., maple in the U.S., and maple and water just 2.5 hours north of here. So as far as tariffs go, it's very much at the forefront of all maple sugar makers, right? We're going to all be affected by the pricing of all of this. Anyway,
I know 75% of the world's maple syrup is made in Quebec, and 62% of that 75 comes to the U.S.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the large commercial guys, there's a lot of them in Vermont, but there's a ton of them in Canada. But by producer counts, I think that the producer count is in the U.S. That's the beauty of the industry, is that there's so many more producers making syrup that are either not reporting minimally, that they're here. They just don't make a lot of syrup by themselves.
Well, yeah.
Oh, you're saying there's more producers in the United States?
I don't know if there's an actual record, because there's a lot of non-reporting, and to go back to Wisconsin, where you are, there's producers everywhere.
Oh, exactly. Right. I was just going to say that, like, over here, it's like everybody and their uncle and cousin and brother at some level do it. And for the most part, it's small. For the most part. Like, I saw some statistic or some survey for the state of Wisconsin within the last few years, and the vast, vast, vast majority of them that, completed this survey, but it gives you an idea. We're like 500 taps or less.
Oh, I see.
The vast, overwhelming majority of people. And that, I would say that's very true around my area. My area is very much that way, with tons and tons and tons.
Well, 53% of the U.S. syrup crop is made in Vermont alone.
Yeah, it's similar here, where it's, there's just a lot of big producers around. But you had I just had a comment here about the price of equipment, and I think it's important to talk a little bit about equipment. Maybe that's my world. Yeah, like, so I guess a couple things I'll say, and this is something that I've heard some chatter about, whether or not we're in the States, right? I think that, so here's the timestamp, right? There's crews in Vermont right now that are Americans making American products. That's not going to change. It's still going to be the same. We're making tubing in the States. So in terms of equipment sales, if the tariff happens, I think that we're well positioned in that way. If the tariff happens to not change, and we're, the objective from Leader's history was to make, I would say, a premium product, but tubing in general is a different category. Tubing is, again, if anybody wants to ever see it, tubing is made in Vermont. Tubing is made in Swanton. So there's extrusion process right there. I think that there's some others, but overall, the U.S. market is a little more insulated from tariffs happening, unless you get your product from Canada. Now, the Canada side, they're all going to be affected by it, right? The price will change. If it's a 25% tariff, anybody that buys Canadian product will change. But it's who knows what happens on both sides. But if you're a company that relies on foreign product, I think you're going to be affected mostly by tariffs, right?
At least for a short time. At
least for a short time. Now, whether or not that's a direct relation, there are some things that are difficult because sometimes parts and pieces come from different areas, but assembly is made here, right? So I think the objective is to minimize that, but our objective always is to do as much as we can from the integrity of the brand and stay where we are. We're not moving. We're not changing. We're not eliminating processes. I mean, some of those things have to happen, but for the most part, it's still about, I mean, guys are proud of what they do, man. You know, yeah, they love what they do. This is not, it's not a commodity. You know, it feels like it sometimes, but it's not. It's a specialty crop. It's a specialty craft, you know?
So really what you're saying is the H2O side is the only thing that's like the ROs are being made in Canada, but everything Leader is still Leader and Swan is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that we don't go through time and see what makes the most sense. You know, I think that, you know, and I've heard the word bean counter. The bean counters may not always like it, but in general, you have to respect the brand and its values. And I think that's the important piece to anybody that doing what they do. And there is parts. I mean, let's face it. H2O is an RO company, but they didn't start there. They actually bought out a company called Darvo. So Darvo is making evaporators. So it's a much older company. So it's almost worth, I know we talked about it, it's almost worth a whole episode, Tim, if you ever have a chance to go through, because it's not just about H2O Leader. It's about all the companies should come together. And like, I've kind of timeline, Matt Thomas has done a bunch of great work with it, but like the timeline is really interesting. It's like this person bought out this person was the brother of this person, you know, like, and I'll give you an example. John Grimm, who was, I believe, a cousin of Gustav Grimm, went to Canada to start selling and making equipment. And he started Grimm Manufacturing, which eventually got bought out by Dominion. So Dominion and Grimm. And then the Grimm company got bought out by Leader. So there's this little intertwining of family, and you're like, wow.
So who bought out Lamb Tubing then?
So Lamb got bought out actually by Grimm, and Grimm was bought out by Leader. So the original Lamb Tubing equipment is in Swanton, Vermont.
No way. I'll be darned.
Okay.
So, and then you take into consideration other companies like Small Brothers. And they were a family that split between Canada and the U.S. and they ended up being bought up by other companies. There's a lot of history that's really interesting. But
that is cool. I have a section of square tubing, of Lamb Tubing. Square.
There you go. They were trying a bunch of things. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
I remember my dad messed around with tubing like way back when I was like when I was just a little kid, and I think that's the brand it was or something like.
Out where you are, Tim, 3M, the 3M company was massive, and that's who Leader bought from. That was the competitor to Lamb, and the Maple Flow and Lewis. Off the top of my head, somebody's going to find it for me, but I can't think of the other name. But those two, Natural Flow and Maple Flow, were the two competitor lines that ended up getting bought out by Lamb, but 3M was making Maple Flow, and the Leader was buying it. They were exclusive. In fact, at the time, Dominion and Grimm and Leader were the only two companies that were allowed to buy that tubing in North America.
Wow.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, cool. If you're a Maple buff, finding that history out is really, really cool. It's, the one thing I'll say is this industry is not that big. It feels like it's kind of a big, I've talked to you, David, before, like this big, huge industry. And I'm like, you can go to a maple show and talk to anybody that is a part of these companies. It's kind of guys like myself who are sort of maple addicts. That's why we work in this industry. That's why you guys do what you do. It's I love the industry.
Yep.
It is very, like you said, it is small. I don't think, because like you said, almost everybody's heard of everyone else and knows everybody at some level or whatever. But what's kind of always been interesting to me is how small of an industry it is. There's quite a few manufacturers of you know what I'm saying, relatively speaking to the size of it. There's a lot of different companies making supplies and equipment.
I would say there's definitely been a step up in the hobby end of manufacturers, I would say.
Yeah.
Like Smoky Lake and that. So. There's one here in Michigan just started. It's like Bassett Maple. They're little barrel 50-gallon drums, like set up for someone with like 20 taps in their backyard, that type of thing,
Yeah, they're growing. I think that I do agree with you. I think the hobby market is growing, and it's an interesting part, I think, of what makes the U.S. not that it's exclusive, but it's different compared to Canada. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Federation at all, but the Federation in Quebec kind of becomes like sort of an inspector regulator, and also it helps. I mean, there's a place to gather syrup, but it's also a place to create a floor for syrup prices.
Yeah.
Without it, you end up with no floor, and you could end up with this massive fluctuation in prices. So
Yep. I actually agree with the purpose of it, and I like the concept, but I don't know if it quite works as it should. I think the U.S. is lacking on something like that. I've often said that, look at honey. Look at the marketing behind honey. You go to Tractor Supply Company, they got bees, they got little honey things, they got honey towels, all this stuff about honey, and you never see it about maple. And there's a national honey association. Why don't we have something like that for maple syrup that focuses on marketing? I feel like we just don't market well.
I don't know if you're familiar, if you know this, if you're part of the federation in Quebec, then six cents of your money goes towards marketing, and it's actually marketing for maple syrup and not Quebec. It might some be for Quebec, but as far as I know, it's fully for maple syrup. So some of that marketing trickles over into the U.S. because, as you said, David, 75% of those sales are in the U.S. So you're going to see marketing from the federation in the U.S. to introduce syrup.
Well, they need to do a better job.
No, I agree. But I would agree with that very much so. That it is such a small industry, so there's probably not a lot of money to, put into nationwide campaigns and stuff like that. But I think I've said this a bunch of times before, and I can't cite the source, but they say like the average person in the U.S. consumes 3 ounces of maple syrup per year. Like that's the average over everybody, and the amount consumed. Well, obviously that's not very much. There's a lot of room for improvement right there.
No, I agree. We have a lot to work on, don't we? I'm sure you guys are the same, but I offset that terribly.
Right. Yeah. Here we got a comment from Zachary. He says, I've said the same about marketing. Look at what Milk did when they were hurting all the Got Milk ads, which that was a really popular ad. That was probably like 25 years. I don't know how long. It was a long time ago, but that sticks. You still think that.
It's a good comment.
I'm pretty sure I seen something on RFK was trying to do something with corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to bring that up as part of this, would that ever be successful? It's such a huge industry and so much money behind it and everything like that. I don't know. I'm not a corn syrup fan at all, but it's in almost everything. Everything. If you look at the package.
Why can't we use our natural sweetener we got right here? And
Well, David, we need your numbers here, but I think that the maple right now is less than 1% of the sugar the market. It's very small,
right?
So corn syrup is gigantic. You're dealing with some big powers there, but we can tout the healthiest, the best sweetener, but whether or not the honey guys just fell over, but in general, I think maple has that space, but. Doesn't mean that we're able to compete with those guys.
Yeah.
I got to give a shout out to Vince here. He got real original. He says, "Got syrup."
Got syrup. There you go. See?
Good one, Vince. Thanks for putting in
the
effort there.
That's good.
That's funny. Let's see here. Corn grower. We got another comment. We actually had, guys, we have a nice little crowd. We've been up to 56, 57 at times, so that's pretty good. And, while we're still here, if you guys are watching and you want to, share it, thumbs up, whatever, do whatever you need to do. That helps get it out there.
The question here about what marketing in Canada actually looks like.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go ahead, Tim. I'll see if I can respond to that.
It says, I wonder what marketing in Canada actually looks like. Lining politicians' pockets? Question. Special interest? Question. I have no clue.
The only thing I can say is I do know David Hall is the head of the federation. He's a good guy, smart guy. I think that there always is the potential of that happening, right? But I think being a small industry, I think again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is that it's you can't name the CEO of GM, you can't name the head of product somewhere in these big companies, but Maple is relatively small. I know it feels big because it's such high dollar and there is some money being tossed around overall at the top, but I think realistically, I think that most people in the industry are concerned about the health of the industry. I do believe that. Is there someone lining their pockets? Probably. It's not me. I can tell you that.
It's just it's going to happen.
What do you think of this comment from Tim? It says, if the maple supply companies want to increase their revenue in the future, they will need to be the marketing powerhouse. People buying the equipment will support the company that helps the markets grow.
No, I agree. I think marketing is huge, right? I think it's a huge piece of what we do. And I think that all companies are starting to step up. I think it is as a whole, their marketing. It wasn't very long ago that most companies didn't have a website. They weren't interested in making videos or doing anything online. It was much more set up like a co-op. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was, I would say 10 years ago and before. Most companies didn't invest in general marcom media, so nice catalogs. They would just do what they could do to get it. There wasn't the money, but they also didn't value it like they do now.
Yep.
So
it's just generational.
It's generational. I agree with you, David. It is. I think that's a different time.
Yeah, we just talked about this on the phone the other day. The first manufacturer that steps up and does what we're doing here and like what you're doing is going to prosper from it.
Well, I didn't even get to see the whole comment, but I kind of found this one pretty interesting. It says, honey has a multi-purpose image. Syrup is viewed as pancake and waffle thing only.
Yes.
I would agree with that. I share it as a sugar. Yeah. I would agree with that.
That's where we need to do a better job educating. And every time I go to any farm market or event where I set up and I'm selling I rarely talk about pancakes. I mean, I'm like, look at this sugar here. Look at, you can put this in your coffee. You can sprinkle it on your toast. And I start talking about all the different things you can do and cook, and you can replace this natural sugar with your processed sugar 1-to-1 ratio. And people, oh, really? I didn't know that. I mean, and it's educating.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And in most parts of the U.S., you guys ever seen those barbecue shows? And
yeah.
A lot of the time, I'm like, man, I'd love to see a maple on one of these. Maple's going to be a part of one of these shows. It is once in a while, but not enough. Like my favorite sauces are a maple barbecue sauce with like a chipotle. I could eat that over everything else that I eat. So
right, or stuff like as an ingredient in drinks or whatnot. Like me and my daughter will get together and make a video once in a while on how to do different things with maple and put it in drinks. Like we did this maple lemonade. It was very simple and it was actually very good. And we made a video about that, and I think that's things like that. People obviously don't even think about it. And, but there's many, many, many uses.
Yeah. My maple barbecue is my most requested and most bought by the case item I have.
Now I need to try some.
I'll bring some out to you, Kevin. I promise.
Yeah, now definitely for me, it's I love a good maple barbecue sauce.
Yep.
But any more questions about tariffs? I know we're talking about tariffs. I don't want to get too far off track, but
yeah, I think we pretty much covered. I do know that Europe is in high demand for organic maple syrup, and they, with Canada, have a free trade agreement. So I don't know. Maybe they would just take a little bit more of the syrup at that point, but how do you think it's going to affect prices here? I guess that's what we should probably get into. We didn't really
talk about that.
We haven't touched on that. So do you think there would be any change here? Because honestly, I don't see it. I don't think our price is going to go. I think they're going to want to, but I mean, I don't know.
Let me just say this. I think the industry is, there's a fair amount of packers, and by no means am I a syrup packer, but I do talk to the majority of syrup packers. I think that the intention is they understand the industry as well. I mean, their intention is as much as they want to sell and make money, they also know that the health of the industry long term is important for their own health. So I know that, and I'll use Butternut as an example. I know his intention is not to drop prices. I think he's actually said that verbally. His intention is not to drop prices. I mean, in some cases, if anybody doesn't know, the worst thing for us in this way now is to have, if anybody follows the exchange right now, I think it's at 145. They're predicting 150 by the second quarter of this year. So that means right when certain people are going to get paid, it could be at 150 exchange. That means, for anybody now, you may take a 10 or 20 cent hit potentially if there's no tariffs, depending on where it is. I mean, So the Federation sets their price at a three-year set. This year, top three grades in the current exchange are right around 230 for conventional syrup, 225 to 230. There's an 18-cent adder for organic, so that puts it close to depending on which region you're in and where it is, around 245 for organic. And then they take the hit on 6 cents, but we don't in the States. So the States can't be significantly under Canada. It kind of follows the Federation because it has to. Yeah. Otherwise, it screws up the market. They can't get undersold. All those things happen. So as of right now, committing the Packers that at least verbally committing to not trying to drop prices, I think it's good for us. But if tariffs happen, there's an opportunity to go up in price.
Yeah, but what I'm concerned about is if it does go up in price, all we're going to do is it's going to get passed to the consumer. And I feel like, with the economy of the state it is and the price it costs, I feel like consumers will consume less because they're not educated on the product. There's no, we haven't built up enough. I don't know what the word is here. I'm looking for, having a brain fart. Not a demand for it, but a need, like a necessity for it. If we had people
I mean, it is a luxury item.
Value, we haven't built the value to it yet. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I when I look in a grocery store and see all the different syrups on the shelf and whatnot, and in Wisconsin here, I have a little bit of a presence, especially with a couple of grocery store chains throughout the state. And I mean, I'm one of the more expensive ones in the stores because I'm small and I, can't do it on the sheer volume that they're doing this stuff at. I just don't see those bigger guys raising their prices because they're all kind of competing against each other to be real competitive and have that shelf space in a much larger scale than I do. I think they'll just try to do it on more volume and, I don't really see it.
Value added product. That's what I was looking for. I had to, it's not a value added product yet. If we could get there, then we could raise the price a little bit because it's a value added product. But I think they're just going to go back to the fructose corn syrup. They're going to be sitting there
right.
I think things will change around eventually here. But as of right now, I don't think it would be long-term a great thing.
Well, I will say that I believe that syrup is already a premium product, as most buyers aren't buying it because they're buying a deal in most cases. Sometimes they will if it's in the right place, but they're going there with the intention of buying a product because they want the product, right? So I think that helps us. Yeah. Obviously a direct 25% increase can affect our market, but I do think there's enough, outside of California, where that's just a big market in California. I think the other majority of syrup at least in the U.S. is sold in the maple markets, right? You're selling it, I'm selling it. We're selling in the maple markets.
Yeah.
I don't see those fluctuating with tariffs. Tim, you're going to sell the same place you sell for similar dollars because you didn't get a spike on majority of, unless all the other products you have to buy are much more expensive. But as long as you're within your channels, you're able to maintain your prices. You can maintain throughout your circles. The same thing with you, David, as well. I think that local markets are easier to sustain. They're more insulated. It's the Canada syrup that goes to California where they might see a hit. But the hope is that the one thing I've always tried to find out, and I know there's some, again, I am not, although I'm in the syrup world, I'm not in the syrup world. The rooms that you get in is how much really is the spend for a producer on syrup. Have we ever really realized that? It's a good one to talk about. Like, what is the spend if you go in the store and you say, I want a quart of syrup today because my family needs it? What's the ceiling?
Yeah.
What's the ceiling?
Yeah, what's
like
the ceiling
on
on a quart? What makes you say, nah, it's too much for me today?
Right. I mean, like I can tell you, in the store here in Marshall, the town that I'm in, it's kind of the quart price in there ranges from, I believe, retail. This is retail on the shelf, 16 up to like 25. Whereas the 16 guys are the ones that are from like out by you. They're stuff that's coming from Vermont or Maine or whatever. And then the higher price ones are the more local, stuff right here in Wisconsin. And that's kind of interesting because they've got to get that all the way here, and they're still, way lower priced.
It's funny because I talked to a maple producer that was selling a gallon of syrup, and his neighbor was mad at him. This is just recently this week because you're selling it too cheap. Okay, so he was selling it at $50 a gallon, and I was like, that's a pretty good price, depending on where you're from. I tend to see that guys in some areas really they don't understand their costs, where they take what the bulk price is and they think, well, I just add a bottle to it, a little bit of time, and just good enough, just add a few dollars, but they don't consider all the other costs, right? So they'll sell a gallon for $36, and then, well, I'm happy. But then, some of those other markets, they're fortunate where this guy had a $65 and a gallon for $65, and he was mad at his neighbor that was at 50. And I'm like, well, at the very least, everybody can eat there, and I think that's where, we don't know at least, or maybe have enough discussion about what is the ceiling for syrup and what do people say. I mean, they're already looking for your syrup and your syrup because they want David's syrup because he makes the best syrup and I want his. It's like, I don't know what the ceiling is. Maybe there probably is some great circles of conversation around that.
Yeah, and it's probably very regional.
Very much.
Local economy. Like my if you go 2 hours east and you get towards Detroit, it is nothing to see an 8-ounce bottle glass for $17.89. I just sent that to Tim, and I'm just like, I was sitting there talking to people. I'm like, I will put my quart on your shelf for 22. It's like, what's going on here?
And a lot of that, like David, depends on the store. Like, if you're in these little specialty, real, touristy type places, obviously you can command, or they can get more. So rather than at the regular just grocery store, that's probably where you're going to find your lowest.
It's all you're very competitive there, right? But it's, I don't know. To me, that's something we should talk more about because I think that people go into it and they're willing to pay when they hear the story. They know the origin, and I don't know if the general consumer is looking at the bottom price. They're just, I mean, in some ways, I might even look away from the bottom price because I'm like, I don't know about, it's. Yeah. I want to go somewhere where I
adding value to a product. You mean that?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I need to have that barbecue sauce. That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah, it's horrible for my gut is that, man, working in this industry, man, there's some good maple products out there. You go to a show and someone's like, here's my best maple donuts, and I'm like, oh, okay. Here we go again. But there's some good maple products out there, let me tell you. And for anybody that says that syrup is good or bad in any state, and there's good syrup and bad syrup everywhere. Like there are some good maple products out there. So, to go back to what you said, we just talked about. I don't know what the ceiling is. It's whatever someone's willing to pay. But I think people are more willing to pay. Syrup sales are still strong. So, hopefully, 25% tariff is people still willing to buy.
Yep.
Right. I would agree. Did we touch on like what the tariffs might do to equipment prices at all?
No, we could. I mean, the one thing I'll say,
if you want to quickly,
and this, I think, and I'll speak honestly. Like I think that we're well positioned with our manufacturing in the States, especially with plastic, So plastic sourced out of the States. It's made in Swanton. I think we're well positioned in that way to be competitive in tubing. Steel is also sourced in the States, especially in U.S. made products. The one thing I'll say sometimes is I know we get kind of like this about U.S. and Canada, but the guys in Canada are proud too. It's like proud Americans, proud Canadians. They're proud of what they do. They're making, regardless of whether it's a company that I work for or other companies, there's all these things. But in general, people are proud of what they do. But I think we're well positioned to, minimize the impact. But the one thing that scares me, and it's similar to what happened in COVID. COVID was a nightmare for anybody that worked in business where they had to control costs. I mean, that's part of what I do. And when I had to go through COVID and I had a vendor email every week that was like, oh, here's another 5%, here's another 5%, here's another 10%. And I'm worried that the snowball of vendors is going to force our hand, because 25% tariff across the board, like you said, David, is big. Yeah. But what happens when I'll use a steel company as an example. What happens when the vendors from the steel company start adding those together, and then you got 7 layers of tariffs, and you're like, what does that really end up meaning? Does that mean a higher tariff in the end? I hope not. But, we want to minimize the effects overall as a whole, because, U.S. made, it's not a secret. U.S. made products cost us more. It is less expensive with the exchange, with the tax system to make products in Canada than it is in the U.S. That's just a fact. It's be nice to change that, but that's a fact. So I think that we're well positioned by having people on the ground in the States with American products by vendors in America. I think that's good, but it doesn't mean that it's everything. It will affect all of us. It will. Everybody's going to be dealing with tariffs one way or another.
Won't it technically bury Canada? They're already in a mess up there right now with everything going on. This potentially could literally bury, it'd be just like you're saying, COVID type emergency situations, because the auto manufacturers will be everybody will be laying off.
I mean, there's certainly a chance of that. Canada. I expect, as you said in the first part of the show, with all of the percentages of things that we get out of Canada, if there's a tariff that comes, and it does happen, there's going to be certainly the opposite. There's going to be the opposite that happens, right? They're going to tariff. We're going to be tariffed by them, or they're going to tariff on the other side.
Yeah, they're going to tariff their oil and their lumber.
Exactly. Yeah, they're going to tariff everything. So it's potentially, but I see this the Maple dude is my favorite Maple personality ever. He's kind of famous. I think that's the case. That's the thing.
Wow, that's high praise from CS. We don't know who that is, but thank you very much.
I did really stumble on another little fun fact today when I was looking around. The average yield per tap in the U.S. is 0.342 gallons per tap.
Yep.
I was thinking it might have been a little higher than that, but.
Well.
Yeah, when you consider everything,
Well, the thing about it is that the sugars tend to creep as you get higher in the as you go north. As you go north, sugars tend to creep. Northern Vermont, northern Maine, northern Michigan, in maybe Wisconsin not so much, but no, just kidding. But the Wisconsin, I think as you get more hard maples in soils, and believe it or not, rocky soils can produce high sugars. As you go south, I tend to see nicer trees. I mean, if you guys have ever ventured through Quebec and look at the trees, you're like, these are terrible trees. Vermont trees look terrible compared to Michigan trees.
Yeah.
I mean, the two nicest places that I see trees in the States are between both of you. Go up around and go to the top of the UP and go down through Rhinelander and just drive all the way across Michigan. Yeah. It's unbelievable maple.
Yeah.
Up there on Highway 29, you go from Wausau, Athens, Edgar, that's over to kind of Shawano and stuff like that. That part of Wisconsin's kind of the heart of Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, And the other thing too to think about, and I was just to answer your question, or that you talked about yield overall. The high yields you hear include commercial grade syrup. That's the one thing to remember as well. Is it's high vacuum, and yes, some areas make some serious syrup poundage, but it's also including a whole crop, and it may not be all marketable for table grade, and they blend. So that's the one thing to remember sometimes too. It's like, well, how come I can't find the same success in my retail market? It's because you shut off earlier. You know, you're shutting off because as soon as the syrup flavor changes to your palate, you're done. Where, you know, someone that's making commercial syrup or making it to a market, they're a range of flavors and they have marketability for that. There is, you know, I think it's almost as important to get marketability for lower grade syrups than it is table grade syrups, because
I would agree with that.
And I don't mean low grade syrups to be table grade syrups. I mean lower grade syrups to have marketability, where there's other products that they could go in that I'd much rather put a low grade syrup in a product versus corn syrup or other crap.
Correct.
You know, so
we
all need to find that, you know, but
like granola bar type things.
It says if Canada's doing what they're supposed to do and securing their border, there won't be any tariffs. Hey,
shots fired
right there.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, there you go.
Yeah,
I agree with them. I agree with David. We got what else we got, guys? What else is going on here before we check out for the night? Did you know there is this CS guy again? Did you know there is a small population of maple producers in Washington State? I found that out watching a lame Hallmark Christmas movie.
I did not know that.
There is actually there's a pretty I would say an enthusiastic group out there that's making big leaf maple. Yes, there is.
Huh.
Yes,
so it's true.
They do make syrup out there.
Okay.
In fact, some of those areas, years ago, I talked to some gentlemen on Vancouver Island, which is, I think, similar trees out there where it's incredible how they're doing it. It's different weather. It's obviously different trees, but they're still making syrup. Syrup spans quite a ways.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I didn't know that. It is true. The Hallmark movie was accurate, apparently. Let's see here. Is it probably not? Wonder if it tastes different. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
That one I can't answer.
We could give it a try sometime. Let's see here. What else we got? It's almost time to log out for the night. Zachary says he's got a boil
we got
sap
somebody making syrup. Where's that? Where's Zachary from?
I think he's Kentucky, isn't he?
Kentucky.
I might be wrong. Correct me
if
on
it's
that,
Kentucky, you'll have to let me know. There's a gentleman down in southwestern Kentucky. Might be one of the most south I've seen that's making any scale. Fantastic guy.
I actually went down to I was asked to talk at the Kentucky Maple Syrup Producers Association thing back in, I think it was September or October. And I went down there as a guest speaker, but they had some people come up. There was a guy that he had to be like, he felt he was maybe the most further south. He was from Tennessee. This guy was in Tennessee. And then there was another guy there that was in Virginia. So it's pretty crazy. And then I followed the Tennessee on Facebook, and I saw they're already doing it right now. He's into it right now. I think it was called Afton Mountain Maple. But there was a Tennessee producer, which I thought was pretty unusual.
It's fun to see him when they kind of pop up. You're like, oh. I actually went down to see that guy in Kentucky, and he told me he told me about 3 times that he had maples, and I'm like, I don't know. Well, sometimes they tell you that they have a lot of maples, and they just don't. And he did have a pocket of maples out there, and he makes some really nice syrup.
Yeah, I just looked up Zach. He's PA. I was wrong.
PA. Okay, there you go. All right.
My bad.
Yep. So he is warm enough to make syrup.
Oh, there you go. He responded right there. There you
go. Yep. Well, guys, we had a good talk. I think we had a nice crowd the whole entire time, and enjoy having you here, Kevin.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again. David, as always, a pleasure. And you guys have a good night, and we will talk to you guys soon. And remember, always
take care, guys.
Yeah, see ya.
All right, bye.